Rain traced patterns down the glass. 68 floors above Chicago, where the city lights blurred into nothing that mattered anymore. William Hart stood at the window, a tumbler of bourbon growing warm in his hand, watching his own reflection instead of the view. 38 years old. $4.2 billion. Zero reasons to smile. The phone buzzed against the marble countertop. Stephanie's name lit the screen with a heart emoji he'd never programmed. His girlfriend has been with him for 10 months. Former model. Current entrepreneur whose ventures always seem to require his funding. Beautiful enough for magazine covers. Cold enough to make winter feel warm. Before we continue our story, let's welcome our viewers from Australia, and to our viewers in the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Your loyalty, strength, and spirit have built the foundation of this channel. Every view, comment, and share is a heartbeat in this story we're building together. Now let's go back to our characters. 3 nights ago, he'd seen her, leaving the Ritz-Carlton with Brian, his best friend since Yale, his chief financial officer, his brother in everything but blood. The amber glow of the hotel entrance had painted them golden. Stephanie's hand on Brian's chest, Brian's hand on her lower back, the kind of intimacy that doesn't lie. William had said nothing, just drove home, poured this drink, started paying attention. The late-night calls she took behind bathroom doors. The way Brian pushed for expanded financial authority. Their glances at board meetings, quick, knowing, guilty. Betrayal, written in a language William had spent 20 years learning to read in boardrooms, now appeared in his bedroom. He needed proof, not suspicion, not paranoia after 2 decades of cutthroat business. He needed to see how deep the knife went. Then Tuesday night happened. The Mercedes hydroplaned on Lakeshore Drive, rain-slicked asphalt, too much speed, physics catching up with carelessness. The world spun sideways. Glass shattered. Airbags exploded like grenades. Metal screamed against the concrete median. William walked away. Concussion. Bruised ribs. 14 stitches above his left eye. Minor damage for a major opportunity. In the hospital, Stephanie scrolled through her phone while he bled. Brian made business calls in the hallway instead of asking if William would live. Neither of them is present. Neither of them is real. That's when William made his decision. "Doctor," he said slowly, carefully measuring each word. "Everything's blurry. Like I'm looking through fog." The doctor frowned. Tests began. MRIs. Specialists with grave voices discussing optic nerve damage and uncertain timelines. By discharge 2 weeks later, the story was set. Temporary blindness, possibly permanent. They'd know more in 6 months. William wore dark glasses now. Walked with practiced hesitation. Let people guide him through doorways. Let them think he couldn't see their faces when they thought he wasn't looking. And he watched everything. Behind those dark lenses, his vision remained flawless. Crystal clear. 2020. He could count the threads in Stephanie's designer scarves. Read the text messages Brian thought he was hiding. See every micro-expression, every tell, every lie. He sat in his study now, alone in manufactured darkness, security footage playing on the screen they thought he couldn't see. Stephanie and Brian, meeting in the parking garage, sharing hotel key cards, laughing at jokes William wasn't part of. He could see perfectly fine. He always had. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. Stay tuned, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. William, darling, you need to be more careful. Stephanie's voice carried that particular pitch people reserve for children and the elderly. Too loud, too deliberate, as if his supposed blindness had somehow stolen his ability to think. They were in his study. Late afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in amber. William sat at his desk, dark glasses hiding the fact that he could see every detail of her face. The micro-expression of irritation she couldn't quite mask. The way her eyes flicked to her phone every 30 seconds. William knocked the pen holder off his desk with a sweep that looked accidental. Pens scattered across mahogany. He turned his head slightly left of where Stephanie stood. The performance required precision. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice thin with manufactured embarrassment. Stephanie sighed. Not with sympathy. With inconvenience. "It's fine, William." She crouched, gathering pens with the efficiency of someone checking tasks off a list. "You're doing remarkably well, considering." Considering. The word she used like a scalpel. While she collected the pens, her free hand drifted toward his desk drawer. The one where he kept acquisition files. She thought he couldn't see the way her fingers tested the lock. "Brian sent over the documents," she said, placing papers in front of him. "Power of attorney. Temporary. Just until you're back to yourself." "I am myself." "Of course you are." The tone parents use with confused children. "But you need help right now." "We all do." She guided his hand to the signature line. "Just here." William's fingers found the pen. Hovered. "I'd like my attorney to review it first." A pause. Then her hand on his shoulder, the touch calculated, cold despite its warmth. "Don't you trust me?" He turned toward her voice, eyes unfocused. "Of course I do." She left 20 minutes later. The moment the elevator doors closed, William removed the clouded contact lenses and pulled up the security footage. There she was in high definition, searching his desk, photographing documents with her phone, her face tight with frustration when the drawer wouldn't open. He'd seen enough. The janitorial service arrived Friday at 8 p.m. sharp. William sat in his study, contacts back in, posture carefully arranged in his chair. He heard the supervisor's whispered instructions in the hallway. Mr. Hart was in an accident. He can't see. Be gentle, okay? Don't startle him. I know how to clean a room, David. The voice was matter-of-fact, unimpressed. A woman's voice with South Side Chicago vowels. I'm just saying. You're just saying. Like I don't have eyes. I'll manage. Footsteps approached. Not tentative. Normal. She appeared in the doorway. 31, black, hair pulled back, practical, wearing the green uniform like armor against the penthouse's opulence. Brenda Mitchell, she said. No baby voice. No exaggerated gentleness. I'll vacuum last. Too loud while you're working. William turned toward her, startled despite himself. Thank you. You want anything moved? No. Thank you. She nodded and started dusting, humming something low and rhythmic. Gospel, maybe. She moved through the room with the confidence of someone who'd cleaned 1,000 just like it. 15 minutes later, she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pulled the curtains open. William stiffened. I didn't. You can't sit in the dark like this, Brenda said. Not asking permission. Stating a fact. It's not good for you. I can't see the view anyway. No. But your body knows the difference. She returned to dusting. My mama went blind when she was 15. Glaucoma. She used to close all the curtains too, first year. Said what's the point? William found himself listening despite the boundary she'd just crossed. Then one morning, she felt the sun on her face through the window. Said it reminded her that the world's still there, whether she sees it or not. Started opening them after that. Brenda moved to the bookshelf, straightening spines with careful hands. She learned to feel everything instead. Made quilts by texture. Knew people by their footsteps. Said sometimes you see more clearly when you stop trying to look. She glanced at William, and he felt the weight of her gaze even though he kept his eyes vague and distant. You're not broken, Mr. Hart. You're just learning how to see again. Something shifted in William's chest. Not the satisfaction of surveillance. Something else entirely. Curiosity. About who this woman really was. Brenda's alarm went off at 5 a.m. She silenced it before it woke Marcus and Destiny in the next room. Their apartment in Englewood had thin walls. She'd learned to move quietly. The hospital cafeteria shift started at 6. She pulled on scrubs, made coffee, and left a note for Marcus about his math homework. In the break room 4 hours later, Mrs. Washington, 93, dialysis 3 times weekly, reached for Brenda's hand. When you gonna let someone take care of you, baby? Brenda smiled, squeezed back. I'm fine, Mrs. Washington. That's what you always say. The old woman's eyes were sharp despite their cloudiness. Fine ain't the same as happy. Brenda's phone buzzed. Principal Morrison. Her stomach dropped. I have to take this. She already knew before answering. She left work early, again, and drove to Marcus's school, where the vice principal led her to an office that smelled like disappointment and industrial cleaner. Marcus sat with his hood up, knuckles bruised purple. 1 week suspension, Principal Morrison said. 0 tolerance. He was defending himself. He threw the first punch, Ms. Mitchell. We have witnesses. In the car, Marcus stared out the window. Brenda gripped the wheel. You want to tell me what happened? No. Marcus. They called me something. I handled it. Getting suspended isn't handling it. What was I supposed to do? Let them. He stopped, jaw tight. 16 and already carrying weight that bent his shoulders. Silence filled the space between them. Then quieter. What about your choices, Bren? She glanced at him. You work 3 jobs. You never sleep. You take care of everybody. His voice cracked slightly. When do you get to live? Brenda opened her mouth. But she had no answer. She pulled into their building's lot, engine ticking in the cold, and realized she'd been holding her breath. Brenda found William standing by the windows when she arrived that Friday night. Not sitting. Standing. Facing the city like he could drink in the lights. She set down her cleaning supplies quietly, but he turned at the sound. You're covering Maria's shift again, he said. Not a question. A statement. Brenda paused. How did you know? You smell different on Fridays. Hospital cafeteria. Coffee and antiseptic. Maria smells like cigarettes and drugstore perfume. She studied him. The way he held himself. The precision of his posture. You notice a lot for someone who can't see. Blindness sharpens everything else. He tilted his head. Your mother. The one who went blind at 15. How long did it take her to adjust? Brenda moved to the bookshelf. Began dusting. Why do you want to know? Because I'm trying to understand if this gets easier. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. She'd cleaned for wealthy people before. They didn't ask janitors about their lives. Didn't admit weakness. She chose her words carefully. Mama cried for 6 months straight. Then she got angry, threw things, screamed, pushed everyone away. My daddy almost left. Brenda ran the cloth along the leather spines. Then one morning, she woke up and decided to feel everything she couldn't see. What changed? She stopped fighting what was gone. Started paying attention to what was left. Brenda glanced at him. Started quilting. Said her fingers could see texture, weight, the way fabrics spoke to each other. Made the most beautiful quilts you ever felt. William's jaw worked. But she was still blind. Yeah, she was still blind. Brenda moved closer. But she wasn't lost anymore. The silence between them shifted. Became something other than employer and employee. Sometimes you see more clearly when you stop trying to look, Brenda said softly. William turned fully toward her voice. For a moment, she thought his eyes focused, really focused, on her face. Then he looked away. Thank you, he said, for treating me like a person. That's a low bar, Mr. Hart. William. And you'd be surprised. 20 minutes later, voices erupted from the study. Brenda was cleaning the hallway, door half open. She tried not to listen, but the anger made it impossible. 60 million is insane right now. William's voice, hard-edged. We don't have the infrastructure. We have the capital. Brian's voice, smooth, patient, dangerous. The projections show. The projections assume variables we can't control. William, the patience thinned. You're not thinking clearly. The accident, the stress. Don't. I'm trying to protect you. We all are. A pause. Stephanie and we're both worried. You're making decisions based on fear, not data. I'm making decisions based on 20 years of experience. Experience that's been compromised. Brian's voice dropped, intimate and cruel. You can't see anymore, William. You need to trust the people who can. Silence. Then William quiet. Get out. William. Out. Footsteps. Brian emerged from the study, face tight with controlled rage. He didn't acknowledge Brenda as he passed. She waited 30 seconds, then knocked on the doorframe. William sat at his desk, head in his hands. Mr. Hart, you okay? He looked up. For a second, she saw something naked on his face. Exhaustion, betrayal, loneliness so deep it had roots. Then the mask returned. Fine. Thank you. Brenda should have left. Should have finished her shift and gone home to Marcus and Destiny and the stack of bills on the kitchen table. Instead, she stepped inside. Can I tell you something my mama used to say? William gestured. Permission. She said losing her sight didn't change people. Just made it harder to ignore what was always there. Brenda chose her words carefully. The people who loved her stayed. The ones who wanted something from her showed themselves real quick. William's hands stilled on the desk. Everyone thinks they can take advantage, he said quietly. Because I can't see. Maybe. Brenda met his unfocused gaze. Or maybe you're just seeing them clearly for the first time. He stared at her, through her, and she felt the weight of something unspoken. If you saw something wrong, William said slowly, something that affected me, would you tell me? Yes. Even if it wasn't your place? Especially then. Something settled between them. An understanding. A contract neither of them could name yet. Thank you, Brenda. She nodded and left him there, surrounded by glass and steel and the city he could no longer see. But she felt his eyes on her back the whole way out. William watched her for 3 weeks. Not every day. That would be obvious. Strategic surveillance required patience. Tuesday evenings, she volunteered at Southside Hope Center, served meals to homeless families, knew every regular by name, gave Darnell extra cornbread because his daughter loved it, helped Miss Lisa fill out housing assistance forms even though Miss Lisa's handwriting was better than hers. Thursday afternoons, her one day off, she mentored teenage girls at the YWCA, sat with them through homework, through heartbreak, through the violence that leaked into their lives like water through cracked walls. Saturday mornings, she read to elderly residents at 3 different nursing homes. The ones whose families stopped visiting. The ones the world forgot. William sat in surveillance vans, watched through telephoto lenses, listened to audio feeds. Brenda gave away money she didn't have. $5 to a kid who needed lunch. $20 to a woman short on rent. $50 to the Hope Center when their refrigerator broke. She remembered everyone's names. Everyone's stories. She showed up. Consistently. For people who had nothing to give back. And William realized, watching her hug a sobbing 16-year-old in a YWCA bathroom, that he'd spent 20 years building an empire. But he'd never built anything that mattered like this. Brenda Mitchell was the most extraordinary person he'd ever surveilled. And she had absolutely no idea how much power she held. The donation arrived at Southside Hope Center on a Wednesday. Anonymous. $100,000. Wire transfer. Untraceable. William watched from across the street as volunteers unloaded new refrigeration units, industrial stoves, enough supplies to feed twice as many families. He watched them cry with joy. Watched Pastor Green fall to his knees in the parking lot, thanking God. Watched Brenda stand very still in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't celebrate. She scanned the street like she was searching for something. Or someone. That Friday, she arrived at the penthouse 15 minutes late. Cleaned in silence. No humming. No stories about her mother. When William tried to make conversation, she gave him one-word answers. Everything all right? Fine. The center got a donation, I heard. She paused. Just for a second. Yeah. That must help. Must. She moved to the next room without looking at him. She left 30 minutes early without explanation. William sat in the dark, contacts still in, and felt the first whisper of unease. Thursday afternoon, William followed her to the YWCA. He told himself it was research, understanding, making sure his investments were sound. But he knew the truth. He couldn't stop watching her. She met with 6 girls in the community room. Tanisha, 16, braids pulled back tight, eyes red from crying, couldn't stop shaking. William's audio feed picked up fragments. Mama got evicted, 3 days, shelter on Roosevelt, but they say we can only stay 2 weeks. Brenda held her, let her sob, then reached into her purse and pulled out everything in her wallet. $217. William knew that was everything. He'd seen her bank statements. She had $340 total. Rent was due in 5 days. Take it, Brenda said. Get you and your mama a motel room. Safe one. I'll figure out the rest. Brenda, I can't. You can. You will. She pressed the cash into Tanisha's hands. You call me tomorrow. We'll find something. After Brenda left, William made 3 phone calls. By Monday, Tanisha's mother had 6 months' rent paid on a modest apartment in a better neighborhood. She had a job interview at a medical office. Tanisha had a voucher for school supplies and a laptop for homework. All anonymous. All untraceable. All wrong. 2 weeks later, Brenda submitted her resignation to the cleaning service. William's assistant received the notification. He stared at it for 10 minutes before he understood. She knew. Somehow she knew. He found her apartment building in Englewood just after 7 p.m. Crumbling brick. Windows repaired with tape and cardboard. 3 flights of stairs, no elevator, graffiti marking territory on every landing. He climbed in his $1,000 shoes, and every step reminded him how far he'd traveled from the world Brenda lived in. She answered on the 3rd knock. Exhausted, hair wrapped, wearing scrubs from the hospital shift. Eyes red like she'd been crying. She didn't look surprised to see him. You can see, she said. No question. Flat statement. William's carefully prepared speech evaporated. Brenda, you've always been able to see. She leaned against the doorframe, and he realized how bone-tired she looked. The donations. Tanisha's apartment. The Hope Center's equipment. All of it started right after you. She stopped. Right after you watched me. I wanted to help. You wanted to control. Her voice didn't rise. Somehow that made it worse. You followed me. Watched me. Decided what I needed without asking. I saw what you were doing. The sacrifice. I have resources you don't. So you erased it. Now the anger came, hot and sharp. That $200? That meant something to Tanisha because it cost me something. Because she knew I gave up my rent to make sure she had a safe place to sleep. You can't pay rent with $200. That's not the point. Brenda's voice cracked. The point is she knew someone cared enough to sacrifice. To see her. To choose her even when it hurt. She stepped back into her apartment. William could see past her. Cramped living room, second-hand furniture, 2 teenagers watching from the couch with wary eyes. Your money fixed the problem, Brenda continued, quieter now. But it erased the meaning. Made my kindness worthless. Made it about you, not about her. William's throat tightened. I didn't mean. You never mean to, do you? Rich people never do. She looked at him, really looked, and he felt stripped bare. You think kindness is something you can buy. A transaction. Write a check, solve a problem, feel good about yourself. That's not. But you can't buy kindness, William. You have to live it. You have to show up when it's inconvenient. When it costs you something real. When there's no one watching and no tax deduction and no guarantee it'll even make a difference. Tears tracked down her face, but her voice stayed steady. I quit because I can't trust you. Can't be around you knowing you're watching, calculating, deciding what I need like I'm some project. Some experiment. She wiped her eyes. My mama went blind, but she saw people clearly. You can see everything, but you don't see anything that matters. Brenda, please. You need to figure out who you actually are, she said. Not who you're pretending to be. Not who you think I want you to be. Who you are when no one's watching. When there's no performance. She started to close the door. Wait, William's hand shot out, stopped it. Let me try again. Let me. Go home, Mr. Hart. William. Please. Just William. She looked at him one last time. Something like pity crossed her face. Go home, William. The door closed. He stood in the hallway, cracked linoleum, flickering fluorescent, smell of fried food and mildew, and heard voices through the thin walls. Marcus. Who was that? Brenda. Nobody. Just nobody. William walked down 3 flights of stairs and climbed into his town car, where Brenda Mitchell's judgment followed him like smoke. You need to figure out who you actually are. His phone buzzed. 17 missed calls. All from Brian. William's phone erupted before he reached the car. Brian's name flashed across the screen. He let it ring. It stopped. Started again immediately. Then a text. Emergency. Office. Now. Then another. Everything's falling apart. We need your signature today. Then Stephanie. William, please. The board is panicking. If you don't act now, we lose everything. His driver opened the door. Home, Mr. Hart? William stared at his phone. At Brenda's closed door 3 floors up. Office, he said quietly. Downtown. The boardroom felt different at night. Glass walls reflecting Chicago's lights. Empty coffee cups from an earlier meeting. The smell of expensive cologne and desperation. Brian and Stephanie stood when he entered. United front. Concerned faces. Thank God, Stephanie said. We've been trying to reach you for hours. The Singapore deal is collapsing, Brian added. They need commitment tonight or they walk. 60 million in capital, gone. William walked to the head of the table, set down his briefcase, removed his dark glasses. The silence stretched. Brian and Stephanie stared at his eyes, clear, focused, tracking their faces with perfect precision. William. Stephanie's voice went thin. You can see. He smiled. No warmth in it. Yes. For about 4 months now. Brian recovered first. Why the hell didn't you tell us? I wanted to see what you'd do. William sat, leaned back. Interesting choice of words, isn't it? See. Observe. Watch people when they think no one's looking. Stephanie's hand found Brian's arm. Barely perceptible. But William caught it. How long have you been sleeping together? He asked. The color drained from Stephanie's face. That's, Brian started. 11 months. William opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder. Started at the Denver conference. Room 1247 at the Grand Hyatt. You've been careful. Usually. But hotel keycards leave digital footprints. He slid photographs across the table. Restaurants. Her apartment. His car. Timestamps and locations. I don't care about the affair, William continued. Stephanie and I have been over for years. We both know it. The marriage is a tax convenience. Then what? Stephanie began. I care about the $60 million. William pulled out another folder. The expansion deal you've been pushing for 6 months. The one that's falling apart tonight. Brian's jaw tightened. Delacroix Holdings doesn't exist, William said. Not really. It's a shell corporation registered in the Caymans. Impressive paperwork. But when you dig past the first 3 layers, you know what you find. Silence. You, Brian. and a very creative accounting structure designed to funnel Hart Industries' capital into offshore accounts. William pulled out more documents. $127 million over 18 months. Small enough increments that the board wouldn't notice. Large enough that you'd both be very comfortable for the rest of your lives. Stephanie stood. "This is insane. Sit down." Something in his voice made her obey. "The FBI has everything," William said calmly. "Forensic accountants report. Wire transfer records. Emails you thought were encrypted. They're building the case now. Should have warrants by Monday." Brian's face had gone white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" William pulled out his phone, turned it around. Email from FBI Special Agent Rebecca Chen, thanking him for his cooperation. "You son of a bitch," Brian whispered. "No." William stood. "You tried to steal my company. That makes you the son of a bitch." He walked to the window, looked out at the city. "I could forgive the affair. Even the embezzlement, maybe. White-collar crime, you'd serve 5 years at most in minimum security." He turned back. "But you tried to kill me." Stephanie made a sound like she'd been punched. "The brake line," William continued. "Mechanic found it 3 days after the accident. Not a failure. Tampering. Very professional work. Cut just enough that it would give out under specific conditions. High speed, wet roads, sharp turns." He looked at Stephanie. Really looked. "Rush hour. Rain. Lakeshore Drive. You knew my route. Knew I'd be going fast because I was late for the Tokyo call." His voice dropped. "You tried to make it look like an accident." "I didn't." Stephanie's voice broke. "William, I swear, I never wanted." "Shut up," Brian hissed. But she couldn't stop. The dam had broken. It was supposed to scare you. Make you more dependent. Not kill you. I told him not to cut it so deep. I told him. Stephanie, shut the fuck up. She looked at Brian. Then at William. Horror dawning on her face at what she'd just confessed. "When I didn't die, you pivoted." William's voice was eerily calm. "Decided to take advantage of the blindness. Push the power of attorney. Control the company while I was vulnerable. Finish the theft." He walked back to the table, placed both hands on it. "Get out." "William," Brian started. "Get out of my building. Out of my company. If I see either of you again before the FBI picks you up, I'll add stalking charges." He leaned forward. "And believe me when I say I'll make sure you serve every single year they give you. No plea deals. No reduced sentences." Brian grabbed Stephanie's arm, pulled her toward the door. She looked back once. "I'm sorry." "No," William said quietly. "You're caught. There's a difference." The door closed. He stood alone in the boardroom. Glass and steel, and the city spread below like a kingdom he'd won. Everything he'd built. Everything he'd protected. Still his. Victory. But the room felt empty. The wind felt hollow. Brenda's voice echoed in his head. "You need to figure out who you actually are." He'd won the war. Exposed the betrayal. Saved his empire. And lost the only person who'd seen him as human. William sank into his chair, surrounded by evidence of his triumph, and felt more alone than he had in the hospital bed, pretending to be blind. His phone buzzed. Another call. Another crisis. Another thing that used to matter. He powered it off. And sat in silence, wondering if winning was supposed to feel this much like losing. Rain fell softly over Englewood, thin as breath, turning the cracked sidewalks into mirrors. The city sounded quieter now, like even Chicago was trying to heal from something. Outside the old brick community center, William stood beneath a half-broken awning, water dripping from the hood of his gray jacket. A worn backpack hung from his shoulder, filled not with contracts or devices, but notebooks, chalk, and a small set of math cards. He'd been taking a leave of absence from Hart Industries since February. The board had wanted him to stay on, at least in name. But he'd refused. It wasn't about wealth anymore, not after everything unraveled. George Sullivan, his mentor and the man who'd once hired him fresh out of Harvard, had stepped back into the company as acting CEO. William could still hear his voice from that last meeting. "Figure yourself out, Will. I'll keep the ship steady until you do." There had been no judgment in George's tone, just quiet understanding, the kind only age and scars could grant. William had walked out of the glass tower that day and never looked back. The world had not forgotten the chaos that followed. Brian was in custody, arrested on charges of federal fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Investigators traced a decade of schemes woven through shell corporations, offshore accounts, and falsified charitable ventures. It was more intricate than William ever imagined. Stephanie had been the final thread that unraveled it all, her name surfacing in emails tied to an attempt to tamper with William's car brakes. The truth made headlines. Corporate betrayal. CEO's inner circle implodes. But William didn't feel vindicated. He felt hollow. He didn't attend the trials, didn't watch the televised coverage. All he saw when he closed his eyes was wasted time. Years of loyalty, all burned down by greed and fear. He wished them no pain, only distance. The kind that lets you start over, even if you have to start from nothing. The air inside the community center smelled like chalk and wet sneakers. Posters hung crooked on the walls, hand-drawn math problems, paper suns, and watercolor rainbows. Laughter echoed faintly down the hall as children packed up their books. William, though here everyone just called him Will, wiped the board clean after his tutoring session. He had spent the past 8 weeks volunteering, helping kids from the neighborhood who struggled with fractions and long division. No one here cared that he once managed billions. No one here knew. "Mr. Will," said Jamal, a 10-year-old boy with wide, curious eyes. "If 3/4 is more than 1/2, why does it look smaller on the pizza chart?" William smiled, crouching down beside the boy's desk. "Because sometimes what's fair doesn't look even. You've got to look closer to see what's really there." Jamal squinted at the paper, then grinned. "That's deep, Mr. Will." "Maybe," William chuckled, "or maybe I'm just bad at drawing pizza." The laughter that followed filled the room, warm and simple. It wasn't the applause of boardrooms or the false praise of investors. It was real. For the first time in years, he felt useful. Not powerful. Not admired. Just useful. He looked out the window at the rain softening the edges of the world and thought, maybe this was what redemption sounded like. The session ended. Kids filtered out one by one, shouting goodbyes. William gathered the leftover worksheets, his mind calm in the rhythm of routine. Then, he heard a voice behind him. "Didn't expect it to be you." He froze, slowly turned. Brenda stood in the doorway, wearing a faded YWCA volunteer shirt and jeans flecked with paint. Her hair was tied back, her face tired but radiant in a way he'd almost forgotten. The kind of beauty that came from purpose, not perfection. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The sound of dripping rain filled the silence between them. You volunteer here? He asked softly. For 3 years now, she said. You? He nodded once. 8 weeks. A small, surprised smile touched her lips. Part disbelief, part something else. I see. She stepped farther into the room, her shoes leaving tiny wet prints across the floor. I came to drop off materials for next week's art workshop. Didn't expect to walk into this. William placed the chalk down, suddenly aware of his heartbeat. Guess the world's smaller than I thought. It always was, she said, looking around the classroom. You just weren't seeing it before. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he reached for the stack of worksheets and offered them to her. Like peace, like apology. She took them gently. The air between them shifted, fragile but alive. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Brenda looked toward the door. I should go. Yeah, William said quietly. Of course. She hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the papers. You planning to keep doing this? He met her eyes. As long as they'll have me. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, They will. You're good with them. Before he could reply, she was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked street. But the faintest smile lingered on his face as he watched her leave. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel like a distant idea. It felt present, breathing within reach. The following Friday, the rain returned. It was thinner this time, more of a whisper than a storm. Inside the community center's main hall, volunteers were setting up tables for the evening tutoring sessions. William arranged pencils and books across a long wooden table when he sensed her before he saw her. Brenda stood at the doorway again, arms crossed lightly over her chest. There was something softer about her now, though her eyes still carried the careful distance of someone who'd been hurt and learned not to show it. I saw the news, she said quietly. About Brian. And Stephanie. He straightened, nodding once. It's all true. They said the investigation started because of an anonymous tip. That was you. Yes, William replied. It had to end somewhere. For a long pause, she just looked at him. The silence wasn't hostile, just heavy, filled with everything unspoken. Finally, she said, You really did lose everything. He gave a faint, tired smile. Not everything. Just what didn't matter. Her brow furrowed slightly. That's easy to say after you've already had it. I know, he admitted. And you're right. But I've learned that winning doesn't mean much if you're alone at the finish line. She didn't respond, only lowered her gaze, tracing her finger across the table's edge. Then, in a quiet voice that cracked just slightly, he said, You were right about me, Brenda. I was blind in every way that mattered. That was the first real truth between them. Clean, unadorned. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It just stood there, honest and naked. She exhaled slowly. And now, he said, I'm just trying to see again. They ended up sitting across from each other in the classroom. Empty now except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Brenda folded her arms, half-guarded. So, she asked, how long have you been volunteering here? 8 weeks, he said. Her eyebrow lifted. 8 weeks. And you didn't know I mentored here. William shook his head, though a faint smile tugged at his lips. No. I picked the center closest to your neighborhood. I thought if I wanted to understand what mattered to you, I should start by understanding the people you cared about. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That sounds dangerously close to following me. I didn't come here to chase you, he said, voice steady. I came here to learn. You used to tell me about this place. About the kids who'd show up hungry but stay for the laughter. I wanted to know what it felt like to be part of something that doesn't depend on profit margins. Brenda leaned back, studying him. You know, the old you would have turned this into a project. A foundation, maybe. A tax write-off with your name carved in steel. He smiled faintly. Maybe the old me would have. The new me just wipes chalk dust off desks. Something in her face softened at that, though she tried to hide it. You're serious about this? I am. And what do you get out of it? He thought for a moment, then said simply, peace. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped against the windowpane in slow, steady rhythm. Finally, William said, I know I hurt you, and I know sorry isn't enough. Brenda didn't interrupt, didn't move, just listened, her fingers tracing slow circles on the table. I was arrogant, he continued. I thought I could control every outcome, yours included. I thought being careful was the same as being kind. But it's not. He hesitated, then added, I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. Brenda's eyes lifted toward him. Something flickered there, wary compassion. The kids talk about you, she said softly. They say you're patient, that you listen. Jamal told me you helped him make sense of fractions using pizza. William chuckled. He's a tough critic. Her lips curved faintly, then steadied again. They like you. That means something. He nodded. I learned from the best. Brenda tilted her head. Don't say that. It's true, he replied. You showed me what it looks like to show up for people even when it hurts. That's something I never understood before. The vulnerability in his voice disarmed her. He wasn't performing. There was no pitch, no persuasion, just truth. He met her eyes. I miss being around the one person who saw me, even when I didn't want to be seen. For the first time, Brenda didn't look away. The walls she'd built trembled, but didn't fall. She stood slowly, gathering the folders she'd brought. You really hurt me, Will. I know, he said quietly. And I don't expect you to forget that. I just want to be better with the time I have left. Brenda watched him, studying the tired lines around his eyes, the ones that weren't there before. You look older, she said softly. Different. Good different? He asked, half teasing, half sincere. Real different, she said. Then, after a beat, that's better. He smiled, small, grateful. Thank you. Brenda hesitated at the door, fingers on the handle. What are you really doing here, William? Is this about me? He shook his head. No. It's about what you showed me, how to live in a way that doesn't cost someone else their peace. But being here, it reminds me of who I want to be. She lingered there, the air between them charged with years of unfinished emotion. Finally, she said, community dinners on Friday. We're short on hands. He looked up. You want me to come? I could use the help. She met his gaze steadily. 6 p.m. Don't be late. He nodded, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. I won't. Brenda turned to go, then stopped. Without looking back, she added, and wear something you don't mind getting dirty. We do real work here. William laughed quietly to himself as she disappeared down the hall. The sound echoed softly, like a promise finding its way back. Outside, The rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but light was breaking through, soft and diffused, as if the world itself were starting to forgive. For the first time in a long while, William felt something like hope, but quieter this time, humbler. Not a rush, not a high. Just a steady heartbeat saying, "This time, don't run." The weeks that followed moved quietly, like the slow thaw of spring after a long winter. William never missed a shift. Tuesdays were for tutoring, Jamal and the other kids now racing to claim seats at his table. Thursdays he mentored a small group of teenage boys, helping them plan college essays and navigate what it meant to be men in a world that often forgot them. Fridays belonged to the community dinners, long folding tables, steaming trays of food, the chatter of neighbors, laughter echoing off old brick walls. Brenda was always there too, coordinating, encouraging, laughing. But between her and William, it wasn't the same as before. They didn't talk about the past, didn't dissect what went wrong. They just showed up. Over time, their silence became something comfortable, like two old wounds healing in the same light. He learned things about her slowly, the way one learns the rhythm of a song by listening rather than analyzing. She never stayed still for long, always in motion, cleaning, teaching, comforting. He began to see what real strength looked like, not power or control, but quiet endurance. And though she said little, he noticed the smallest things, how she'd hand him a ladle without asking, or how their eyes would meet across the room, both of them smiling without reason. No rush, no pressure, just presence. It was during a slow Saturday cleanup when Brenda told him about Marcus. He got into a pre-engineering program, she said, rinsing dishes in the sink. Full scholarship. William grinned. "That's incredible." "Yeah," she said softly. "He worked for it. That kid studies like there's a finish line." "And destiny?" Brenda smiled, a rare, proud smile. 3 college offers. 2 of them full rides. She hasn't decided yet. William leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You did that, you know." She shook her head. "They did it." "No," he said gently. "You held them together long enough for them to believe they could make it." Her hands stilled in the soapy water. For a moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, "My mother died when I was 24. I raised my siblings after that. It was never supposed to be like this." William hesitated, then asked, "And your father?" "Gone before I was born." He nodded slowly, letting the silence settle before speaking. "I was 12 when my mother died. My father, well, he measured love in stock portfolios. I think the last real thing he said to me was, 'Make yourself useful.' So I did. I just never asked useful to whom." Brenda looked up, eyes softening. "You never talked about her." "I didn't know how." They stood there for a moment. 2 people with different pasts but matching scars. No touching, no declarations. Just truth, exchanged gently, like a fragile gift. It happened on a Wednesday night. William was home, his brownstone now a modest 2-story on the south side, not far from the community center. He'd sold the penthouse months ago. He didn't miss it. He was sorting lesson plans when his phone rang. Marcus's voice came through, trembling. "Mr. Will, it's Brenda." She collapsed at work. The words didn't register at first. Then everything blurred. County Hospital smelled of antiseptic and rain. William ran through its corridors, the sound of his shoes slapping against tile. Marcus and Destiny were waiting outside an emergency room, eyes red, hands clasped tightly. "They said she fainted," Destiny said through tears. She's been working too much. No sleep. Hardly eating. William felt the weight of guilt settle like lead in his chest. He should have noticed. She'd been running on fumes for weeks, carrying everyone but herself. Hours passed before a doctor emerged. Exhaustion, he said. Severe dehydration. She needs rest, fluids, time. She'll recover, but not if she keeps this pace. When they finally let him in, Brenda looked small against the white sheets, tubes in her arm, the steady beep of monitors the only sound. Her eyes fluttered open as he sat beside her. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I should have been here sooner," he said. He took her hand, hesitant, reverent. She tried to pull away, but her strength wasn't there. "Brenda, listen," he said, voice low. "Marcus has a scholarship. Destiny's going to Northwestern. They're thriving. You did that." Her eyes filled, but she tried to turn away. "They still need me. They need you alive," he said. She went still. Then, in a whisper, "I don't know how to stop. I've been running for so long, I don't know what it feels like to rest." He nodded. "Then let someone take care of you for once." She gave a faint, disbelieving laugh. "And who's going to do that?" "You." William's hand tightened slightly around hers. "Yes." Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because I love you." The words weren't grand or cinematic. They just were. The quiet kind of truth that fills a room like light through blinds. Brenda looked at him for a long time, as if measuring whether to believe it. "You don't love me," she whispered. "You love the idea of me, the woman who made you see the world differently." He shook his head. "No. I love you because you're real. Because you don't need me. Because you've shown me the only life worth living is one where you're brave enough to feel." Tears welled in her eyes, unguarded now. "You know, the first time you came to that dinner, I thought you were pretending." "I was," he said softly. "But not anymore." She stared at him for a moment longer, then reached up weakly, resting her palm against his cheek. "I love you too," she whispered. "Since the burned rice at that first dinner." He laughed, a soft, breaking sound, and kissed her hand. "So what now?" he asked quietly. Brenda smiled faintly, eyes closing. "Now, we try. Slowly, carefully." He nodded, watching her drift back to sleep, the rise and fall of her chest steady again. For the first time since he met her, he wasn't afraid of what came next. Because whatever it was, they'd face it, not as the man who once tested love, and the woman who once ran from it, but as two people finally learning how to stand still. Outside, the city lights shimmered across wet pavement. In the distance, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, William sat in the half-dark, holding her hand until dawn. The Chicago skyline shimmered under a late spring sun, glass towers glinting like silver blades against a soft blue sky. From the corner penthouse of the Hart residences, the view was endless. Lake Michigan stretching out like liquid gold, the hum of the city below softened by height and peace. William Hart stood by the tall window, hands in his pockets, his reflection faint in the glass. The space behind him no longer looked like the sterile bachelor fortress it once was. Gone were the cold marble counters and minimalist furniture. In their place, soft fabrics, framed photos, warm colors that actually lived. A burnt orange throw over the couch. Art that didn't come from a catalog. A vase of wildflowers on the kitchen island, still slightly crooked, Brenda's touch. She appeared from the hallway, a box in her arms labeled Brenda's stuff number 4. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She set the box down, looking around as if to confirm it was real this time. "Marcus texted," she said. "He and Destiny are both settled. He promised to visit next weekend." William smiled faintly. "I'm glad. It's quieter without them." Brenda smirked. "You mean peaceful?" "I mean," he said, stepping closer, "it feels like a home now." She eyed him knowingly. "A home you still technically own." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold key, holding it out between them. "Not anymore. This is your home too." Her hand trembled slightly as she took it. "You sure about that?" He nodded. "I learned something about control. It's not about keeping people close. It's about giving them space and trusting they'll stay." Brenda smiled, eyes softening as sunlight caught her face. "You really bought this whole place back just to prove a point?" He looked past her toward the skyline. "No," he said simply. "I bought it back because the view's better with you in it." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Hart Industries had changed too. William had stepped back. Not down, just back. George Sullivan, his longtime partner and friend, now served as full-time CEO, while William took the chairmanship. 3 days a week in the office. 4 days out in the world. Those 4 days were where he came alive. The Hart-Mitchell Foundation, named for both of them, wasn't just a tax line. It was a pulse. Together, they funded shelters, schools, and small business grants. But they also showed up. William in jeans and rolled sleeves, Brenda in her element, organizing volunteers, leading workshops, laughing with kids. It wasn't perfect. They argued, often, over strategy, over tone, over stubborn pride. But they fought fair now. No silent treatments, no walking out. And every time one of them stumbled, the other stayed. One evening, after a long board meeting, Brenda leaned against the office window, looking at him. "Do you ever miss it? The rush, the power, being the man everyone answered to." William turned his chair toward her, a small smile forming. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But that version of me didn't know how to breathe. This one does." She smiled, crossing the room to him. "You're still impossible sometimes." He took her hand. "So are you. And yet," she said softly, "it works." He squeezed her hand gently. "It's real. That's all that matters." The city's Southside Community Center was alive with sound. Laughter, applause, the hum of new beginnings. Banners hung from the rafters. Hart-Mitchell Initiative. Building futures, together. Hundreds filled the hall. Parents, students, volunteers. People whose lives had been quietly changed by what began as a blind experiment in empathy. William and Brenda stood at the front, hands clasped as the mayor announced the center's expansion. Marcus and Destiny sat in the front row, both home from college, both volunteers now. Pride flickered in William's eyes as he caught Marcus's glance, a simple nod between father and son that spoke more than words. When it was his turn to speak, William stepped to the podium. The crowd quieted. "I used to think wealth was about what you could control," he began. "But control builds walls. Generosity builds doors. The truth is, no one changes the world alone. You do it hand in hand, heart to heart." He paused, catching Brenda's eyes in the crowd. "This," he gestured to the room, "isn't charity. It's partnership. It's showing up. It's being seen. And I want to keep showing up." The crowd erupted in applause as he concluded with the announcement. Today, we're launching the Hart Mitchell Community Initiative, a 5-year, $20 million commitment to education, healthcare, and housing. But more than money, it's a promise of presence, of time, of trust. Brenda joined him on stage, taking his hand. Together, they smiled as the applause rose around them. 2 lives rebuilt, not from fortune, but from faith. Later, as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, the celebration faded into quiet. Families left in groups, children laughed as they ran through puddles, and the streetlights began to hum. William and Brenda stood just outside the center, watching it all. The mural painted on the wall, a pair of hands holding a city, glowed in the amber light. Brenda turned to him, her voice soft but sure. "You know," she said, "you weren't testing them back then. You were testing yourself." He glanced at her, curious. "How do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "You wanted to see if anything real was left inside you. If you could still be loved for who you were, not what you had." He let the thought sink in. "And?" he asked quietly. She stepped closer, looking up at him. "You passed, because you let yourself be seen. Flaws and all." A soft wind brushed past them. The city's hum became distant, almost melodic. They stood there, hands intertwined, watching the last orange light fade behind the skyline. 2 people who'd been blind in different ways. One to love, one to worth. Finally seeing. Not with eyes, but with hearts. Not with control, but with trust. Not through perfection, but through presence. William looked at her and said, almost in a whisper, "You know what the hardest part was?" "What?" "Realizing the story was never about who failed me. It was about who I became when I stopped pretending." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And who are you now?" He thought for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker on. "Someone who finally learned what wealth means." She looked up at him. "And what's that?" He turned to her, eyes gentle. "It's not what you own. It's who you share it with." The sun disappeared completely, leaving behind a faint pink glow over Chicago, a city reborn, just like them. He had spent months pretending to be blind to expose others. But the real revelation wasn't about them. It was about himself. He had learned that the richest life isn't the one you control. It's the one you live openly, imperfectly, together. With someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway. That was wealth beyond measure. That was the only wealth that ever mattered. Fade out. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family.